So we're turning now. Here in the U.S., more than 24 states have introduced bills targeting transgender rights, particularly against youth gender-affirming medical care and female sports teams. Here to help us track some of these bills is Director of Advocacy and Civic Engagement at Equality Federation, Vivian Toppin. Her specialty is working with state-based LGBTQ organizations crafting effective legislation and electoral campaigns. Vivian, thanks so much for being here with us today on this International Women's Day. So, I want to start first here. Why are we seeing so many of these bills sort of come about at this time?
I would love to know the answer to that question, but I think that a couple things that I think about, this is the reaction to growing support of transgender people across the country. We know that right now, the reality is that 83% of Americans support equal protection under the law for LGBTQ people. And so when we think about this is just a continued reaction to that. As acceptance grows, backlash continues. We also know that this is a coordinated attack by far-right groups to use transgender kids as a wedge issue in the 2022 election. So what we're expecting right now is to continue to see these bills move and continue to see transgender folks being used as a wedge issue in electoral politics.
And how are young people being targeted? I mean, you mentioned them right there. What are some of the ways in which these bills are specifically going after trans young people?
Yeah, so there are two main buckets of anti-transgender bills that are happening across the country right now. The first one is one that would criminalize gender-affirming care, best practice gender-affirming care for transgender youth, meaning that transgender youth wouldn't be able to access the kind of care that they need to be able to live their lives and transition and be who they are. When we're talking about that kind of transgender care, oftentimes that is about having someone use the correct preferred pronoun or preferred name of that person, letting that transgender youth participate and express themselves as they are. But sometimes it does also include medical interventions. Depends on what the doctor is looking for. And so that the first chunk of these is trying to criminalize best practice care. The second chunk is bills that target transgender young women and transgender people and prevent them from being able to access sports, and primarily in K through 12 schools. So those are the two types of bills that are really focusing right now. And both of them focus primarily on transgender kids. And in the case of the transgender athletes bill, those bills focus primarily on transgender women and what it means for us to be a woman and what our bodies are able to be.
And Vivian, you're working with and speaking with people on the ground who are experiencing this every day. What are you hearing from them? How are they feeling about the state of this country and trans rights?
The reality of life for transgender people right now in the US is that we rapidly go back and forth between celebration and fear. Our federal government here in the US is finally recognizing transgender people again and stopping the attacks that were coming from the Trump administration. We spent 4 years under an administration that explicitly attacked transgender people and transgender kids. And now we have a federal administration that is supporting us and that is affirming what we already know, which is that trans rights are human rights. But there are still attacks at the state legislative level. Like you said earlier, there are a little over 100 bills across the country right now that specifically target transgender people. And our community continues to have to defend ourselves at the legislature and in public. Because as these legislative attacks continue, there also continues to be a significant epidemic of violence against transgender people, particularly Black transgender women, who are the folks who are most impacted by this discriminatory legislation.
So what do you see as the top priority to combating this? I mean, you mentioned President Biden has tried to sign a number of bills targeting this, but what needs to happen in order to protect, as you mentioned, trans Black women and others around the country?
So I think, first of all, we need to have the Equality Act pass. The Senate currently has the Equality Act. Right now, across the country, folks don't realize that you can actually be denied housing, denied access to public spaces because of being LGBTQ. And the Equality Act in the Senate would be able to change that. What we need is for the Senate to have courage and to actually be able to pass the Equality Act through the Senate. The other piece is that we need to continue to defeat these bills and help folks understand that transgender people are just like everyone else. We're your friends, we're your family, we're your neighbors, we're the people down the street that you talk to, we are the folks that you see at the store. We are in every community and everywhere across the country. And these kinds of targeted attacks are just discrimination and attempts to legislate transgender people out of existence. And so we need to stop these bills. We need to pass the Equality Act. And we need to have folks understand what it means to be transgender.
Yeah. Well, Vivian Toppin, thanks so much for that message, especially today on International Women's Day. Equality Federation Director of Advocacy and Civic Engagement, Vivian Toppin, thanks for your time.
Thank you.